Kyle Morrison stood in the docking bay and stared at the massive space station floating before him. The Galactic Alliance Military Academy was bigger than anything he had ever seen. It stretched across the darkness of space like a small moon, covered in lights and moving ships. He pressed his hand against the cold window of the transport vessel and felt his heart beat faster in his chest. "First time seeing it?" asked a voice beside him. Kyle turned to see Nathan Cruz, another human cadet. There were only 3 humans in this year's class: Nathan himself and a woman named Lily Patterson who was somewhere else on the transport. "Yeah," Kyle said. "It's huge." "Wait until you see the aliens," Nathan replied with a nervous laugh. "I heard there are over 60 different species training here." The transport docked with a heavy clang that echoed through the hull. Kyle grabbed his bag and followed the line of cadets through the airlock. The moment he stepped into the station, he knew he was far from Earth. The air smelled different, like metal and something sweet he couldn't identify. The gravity felt slightly heavier than what he was used to, and everywhere he looked there were aliens, tall ones with scales that shimmered like oil on water, short ones that seemed to be made of living crystal. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. One creature floated past him, surrounded by a bubble of purple gas. Kyle tried not to stare, but it was impossible. This was real. He was really here, training alongside beings from across the galaxy. A loud voice boomed through the corridor. "All new cadets proceed to Assembly Hall 7. Orientation begins in 20 minutes. Kyle followed the crowd, staying close to Nathan. They walked through corridors wide enough to fit a bus, past windows that showed the black void of space and distant stars. Other cadets pushed past them, speaking in languages that made his translator implant buzz with activity. Some of them glanced at the humans with curiosity. Others didn't look at them at all. Assembly Hall 7 was enormous. Thousands of cadets filled the tiered seats arranged by species according to some system Kyle didn't understand yet. He and Nathan found seats near the back next to a group of blue-skinned aliens who smelled like cinnamon. A figure emerged onto the central platform. He was huge, easily 3 meters tall, with bronze scales covering his body and golden eyes that swept across the assembled cadets. His uniform was decorated with medals and ribbons that spoke of countless battles. "I am Commander Zekthar," the alien said, his voice deep and powerful. "For the next 4 years, this academy will be your home. You will train here. You will bleed here. Some of you will fail here, but those who succeed will become the finest warriors in the galaxy." Kyle listened as the commander explained the rules and expectations. Physical training at dawn, combat simulations in the afternoon, tactical studies in the evening. No exceptions, no excuses. The weak would wash out in the first month. Only the strong would remain. Then the commander's tone changed. "Before we begin your training, you will undergo the proving. This is tradition, older than the Alliance itself. You will be evaluated by the Vorn." A ripple of sound passed through the hall. Kyle leaned toward Nathan. "What's a Vorn?" Before Nathan could answer, massive doors at the far end of the hall began to open. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber. Then Kyle saw it. The creature was like nothing from Earth. It stood nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with 6 powerful legs that ended in claws as long as Kyle's forearm. Its body was covered in overlapping plates of armor, natural and thick as steel. But it was the eyes that caught Kyle's attention. They were crystalline, multifaceted like a diamond, and they seemed to glow with an inner light. "That's a war beast," someone whispered nearby. The Vorn moved with surprising grace for something so large. Beside it walked a thin alien woman with silver skin and white hair. She carried a small device in her hand, but Kyle could tell it was just for show. If the war beast wanted to go somewhere, nothing would stop it. Commander Zekthar spoke again. "This is Catherine. He has served the Alliance for 70 years. He has fought in more battles than most of you have days lived. The Vorn are not animals. They are sentient beings as intelligent as any of us. They have chosen to partner with warriors to fight alongside us, but they choose carefully." The commander paused, letting his words sink in. "Catherine will evaluate each of you. He will smell you. He will sense things about you that no scan or test can reveal. The Vorn can detect fear, courage, deception, and something we call warrior essence. Most of you will simply be acknowledged. A few might earn his approval. But know this, the judgment of a Vorn is absolute. If Catherine rejects you, your time at this academy is over." Kyle felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't come all this way to fail on the first day. He glanced at Nathan, who looked pale despite his dark skin. "Cadets will form a line by species," the commander ordered. "Rothani first, then Centaurans, then proceed by standard classification." The hall erupted into organized chaos as thousands of cadets moved to form lines. Kyle found himself near the end with the other humans and a few species he didn't recognize. The line stretched across the massive hall floor, waiting. Catherine began his inspection. Kyle watched from his position as the war beast approached the first group of cadets. These were Rothani, tall reptilian beings like the commander. They stood proud and straight as Catherine sniffed each one. His massive head lowered to their level, his crystalline eyes studying them. For some, he simply huffed and moved on. For others, he paused longer, his whiskers twitching. One Rothani cadet, bigger than the rest, received a low rumble from Catherine's throat. The handler, Lieutenant Voss, called it the warrior's nod. The Rothani cadet's chest swelled with pride. The process continued. Group after group faced Catherine's evaluation. The Centaurans went next, their silver skin gleaming under the hall's lights. Then came beings made of living stone who made grinding sounds as they breathed. Then insect-like creatures with compound eyes. Then floating beings of energy. Kyle's hands were sweating. He wiped them on his uniform pants and tried to steady his breathing. He had trained for years to get here. He had passed every test Earth's military could throw at him. He had scored in the top 1% of all human applicants. But none of that mattered now. Everything depended on what this creature would sense in him. The cadet in front of Kyle was a Pleiadian named Cora. She was small and delicate-looking, with skin that glowed faintly in the dim light. When Catherine approached her, Kyle could see her trembling. The war beast paused, his massive head lowering until it was level with her face. He breathed out a long, slow breath that made her hair ripple. Then he moved on. Now it was Kyle's turn. He stepped forward and came to attention, his back straight and his eyes forward. Catherine turned to face him. For a moment, nothing happened. The war beast simply stared, his crystalline eyes fixed on Kyle's face. Then he moved closer. The smell hit Kyle first. Catherine smelled like heated metal and something wild, like a thunderstorm about to break. His massive head lowered, bringing those strange eyes level with Kyle's chest. Then he began to sniff. It wasn't like a dog sniffing. This was methodical, purposeful. Catherine moved around Kyle slowly, taking in his scent from every angle. His whiskers, long and silver, brushed against Kyle's uniform. Kyle could feel the heat radiating from the war beast's body. He could hear the low rumble building in Catherine's throat, a sound that vibrated through the floor. The entire hall had gone quiet. Kyle could feel thousands of eyes watching him. Even Commander Zekthar had leaned forward in his seat, his golden eyes narrowed with focus. Catherine completed his circle and stood directly in front of Kyle once more. The war beast's whiskers trembled. His crystalline eyes seemed to brighten, glowing with an intensity that made Kyle want to look away. But he didn't. He held his ground and met that alien gaze. Then Catherine did something that made the entire hall gasp. The war beast's 6 legs began to fold. The sound of Catherine's armored body lowering itself echoed through the silent hall like thunder. His 6 massive legs folded beneath him with careful precision, each movement deliberate and controlled. The war beast's head descended until his crystalline eyes were below Kyle's eye level. Then he bowed his head forward, exposing the vulnerable scales at his throat. Kyle didn't move. He barely breathed. His mind raced trying to understand what was happening, but his body remained locked at attention. Years of military discipline kept him still even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Someone in the crowd dropped something. The clatter of metal on the floor was absurdly loud in the silence. Then the whispers started, soft at first but growing louder. Aliens in every direction were speaking rapidly in their native languages, their translator implants creating a buzzing storm of words. Impossible. It can't be. A Vorn has never. Commander Zek stood so abruptly that his chair scraped across the platform with a screech. His golden eyes were wide, his scaled face showing an expression Kyle couldn't read. Behind him, other officers rose to their feet, equally stunned. Lieutenant Voss, the silver-skinned handler, had her hand pressed to her mouth. The device she had been holding lay forgotten on the floor. She stared at Catherine with an expression of pure shock. The war beast rumbled again, deeper this time. The sound resonated through the floor and into Kyle's bones. Then Catherine spoke. His voice transmitted through the translator implants that every Alliance member carried. I have walked among warriors for 70 cycles. The voice was deep and ancient, filled with weight. I have smelled the courage of champions. I have tasted the fear of cowards. I have stood beside heroes and watched them fall. I have seen empires rise and crumble to dust. Catherine's crystalline eyes lifted to meet Kyle's once more. But never in all my long years of service have I encountered one such as this. Kyle's throat was dry. He wanted to speak but didn't know what to say. He was aware of every alien eye in the hall fixed on him, judging him, trying to understand what was happening. This one carries the scent of old war, Catherine continued. Not learned violence, not trained aggression, something deeper, something that runs in the blood of his kind, passed down through countless generations. This one's ancestors were warriors when my own kind were still learning to hunt. They fought with stone and wood and bone. They fought for survival in a world that tried to kill them every day. And they won. The war beast shifted his weight slightly, his massive body still kneeling before Kyle. I smell it in his sweat. I taste it in the air around him. The memory of a million battles. The fury of prey that became predator. The determination of a species that refused to die. Commander Zekthar descended from the platform. The crowd parted before him like water, creating a clear path. His footsteps were heavy and measured. When he reached Kyle and Catherine, he stopped and studied them both with those intense golden eyes. Cadet Morrison. The commander's voice was carefully controlled, but Kyle could hear the tension beneath it. What Catherine senses we must understand. The Vorn do not bestow such honor lightly. In fact, they do not bestow it at all. No Vorn in recorded history has ever knelt before a cadet. So I ask you now, before all these witnesses, what is your lineage? What blood runs through your veins? Kyle swallowed hard. This was the question he had hoped to avoid, at least until he had proven himself through actions rather than words. But there was no escape now. He had to answer. Sir, I am descended from what humans call the warrior clans. His voice sounded small in the vast hall, but the translator implants carried it to every ear. My family line goes back thousands of years. We were soldiers, fighters, protectors of our tribes. My ancestors fought in every major war in human history. Before humanity reached for the stars, we spent 10,000 years at war with ourselves. A ripple of unease passed through the alien cadets. Humanity's violent history was known throughout the Alliance, but it was rarely spoken of so directly. Most humans tried to downplay it, to emphasize their species' recent peace and cooperation. But Kyle knew there was no point in hiding the truth now. Catherine had already sensed it. An elegant alien woman stepped forward from the group of officers. She had silver skin like Lieutenant Voss, but her hair was pure white and her eyes were a deep violet. Her uniform marked her as someone of high rank. I am High Scholar Prin, director of this academy. Her voice was soft but clear. The psychological evaluations indicated you passed the aggression thresholds, Cadet Morrison. Your scores were within normal parameters for your species. How is it that Catherine senses something our most advanced scanners did not detect? Lieutenant Voss had recovered enough to speak. She moved closer to Catherine, her hand hovering near his scaled shoulder but not quite touching. Because the Vorn do not measure aggression, High Scholar. They measure something else entirely. Something we call in the old tongue chakran. The lieutenant paused, her violet eyes distant as she searched for the right words. There is no perfect translation in common speech. The closest would be the capacity to do violence in service of protection. To become a weapon not for conquest but for defense of the weak. It is the rarest quality in all the galaxy. She looked at Kyle, her expression filled with something like awe. The Vorn were bred for war in the ancient times before the Alliance existed. They were created to fight in battles that would have destroyed lesser beings, but they evolved beyond their purpose. They became choosers, judges of character. They can sense things in the blood and bone that no machine can detect. And what they value most is not strength or skill, but intention. The reason behind the violence, Catherine rumbled his agreement. Among my kind, we have a legend, a prophecy spoken by the first bonded, who walked with the ancient ones before the stars grew cold. She spoke of a race that would come from a small blue world, a species that had climbed from prey to predator, that carried within them the fury of the hunted and the mercy of the enlightened. The war beast slowly rose to his feet, his massive form towering over Kyle once more, but he positioned himself beside the human, his shoulder level with Kyle's chest. It was a stance of partnership, of protection. The prophecy said this race would either save the galaxy or damn it, Catherine continued. They would be young and foolish, quick to anger and slow to forgive. But they would remember something the older races had forgotten. They would remember what it means to fight for survival, to stand against the darkness not because of duty or honor, but because surrender is not in their nature. Commander Zekthar's expression had shifted from shock to something more calculating. You speak of the old legends, Catherine. Stories told to children. Surely you do not believe this human is the fulfillment of ancient prophecy. I believe what I smell. Catherine's voice was firm. I believe what my instincts tell me, and they tell me that this one and his kind will be tested in ways they cannot imagine. The alliance grows soft, Commander. We have had peace for too long. We have forgotten the lessons of our ancestors. But the humans remember. It is in their blood. Nathan Cruz pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with emotion. Lily Patterson followed close behind. They came to stand near Kyle, presenting a united front. Nathan spoke up, his voice steady despite his obvious nerves. Sir, if you're judging humanity by Kyle alone, that's not fair. We're all different. We all come from different backgrounds. But you all come from Earth, Catherine said, turning his crystalline gaze to Nathan. You all carry the same legacy. The same fire. Some burn brighter than others, yes, but you all burn. High Scholar Prin raised a hand for silence. This discussion could continue for hours, but we have an orientation to complete. Cadet Morrison, you will report to the Xenobiology Department after this assembly. They will want to run additional scans. Catherine, Lieutenant Voss, you are dismissed. But Catherine didn't move. No, the word hung in the air like a challenge. Commander Zekthar's scales seemed to darken. The High Scholar has given you an order, Warbeast. I have given my honor to this one. Catherine's voice was calm but absolute. Where he goes, I go. That is the law of the Vorn. That is the tradition you claim to respect. Lieutenant Voss looked between Catherine and the officers, her expression troubled. He's right, sir. Once a Vorn has knelt, the bond is formed. It cannot be undone. Catherine has chosen Cadet Morrison as his partner. The proper ceremonies will need to be conducted, but the choice has been made. High Scholar Prin closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. A first-year cadet bonded to one of our most experienced war beasts. The other cadets will say we show favoritism to the humans. Let them say what they will. Catherine moved closer to Kyle, his massive presence a wall of armored flesh. I have made my choice. The question now is whether the Academy will honor it. Commander Zekthar and the High Scholar exchanged a long look. Finally, the commander nodded slowly. Very well. Cadet Morrison, you and Catherine are now bonded under Alliance law. You will attend the standard bonding classes. You will learn to fight together, to think together. But understand this, you will receive no special treatment. If anything, more will be expected of you now. You represent not only humanity but also the judgment of the Vorn. Fail, and you shame both. Kyle finally found his voice. I understand, sir. I won't fail. See that you don't. The Commander. The halls of the Academy buzzed with gossip for days. Everywhere Kyle went, aliens stared at him. Some looked curious. Others looked angry. A few looked afraid. He tried to ignore them and focus on his studies, but it was impossible to escape the attention. His quarters were in the human dormitory, a small section of the station designed for oxygen-breathing species with similar environmental needs. Nathan and Lily lived down the hall from him. The three of them had become close out of necessity. The other species formed their own groups, their own alliances. The humans had only each other. On the third day after the assembly, Kyle was summoned to the bonding chambers. These were special rooms deep in the station, designed for Vorn and their chosen partners. Lieutenant Voss met him at the entrance. Nervous? She asked. Should I be? She smiled slightly. Most cadets spend months preparing before bonding with a Vorn. You got maybe 3 days. So yes, you should probably be nervous. She led him through a series of doors that required her handprint and retinal scan. The security was intense. Finally, they entered a massive chamber with high ceilings and walls made of some dark metal Kyle didn't recognize. In the center of the room, Catherine waited. The war beast looked even bigger in the enclosed space. His crystalline eyes tracked Kyle's approach, and that familiar rumble started deep in his chest. I'll leave you two alone, Lieutenant Voss said. The bonding is personal, but I'll be right outside if you need anything. Then she was gone, and Kyle stood alone with the creature who had changed his life. Sit, Catherine said, lowering himself to the floor. We must talk. Kyle sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor looking up at the war beast. About what? About what I smelled in you. About what it means. About what is coming. Catherine's whiskers twitched. You feel it, don't you? The weight of expectations. The eyes watching you everywhere you go. Yeah, Kyle admitted. I didn't come here to be special. I just wanted to serve. To prove that humans belong in the Alliance. And now you have the attention of everyone. Catherine's tone was sympathetic. I apologize for that. But I could not help what I sensed. When I smelled you, I smelled something I have only encountered once before many years ago. Kyle leaned forward. What did you smell? Purpose. Catherine's eyes seemed to glow brighter. Most beings go through life without ever knowing why they exist. They eat, they sleep, they work, they die. But some are born with purpose burned into their very bones. They are weapons forged by fate for a specific task. You are one of these. I don't feel like a weapon. No weapon feels like a weapon until it is needed. Catherine shifted his massive weight. Let me tell you a story. 70 years ago, I was young and foolish. I had just completed my own training and was assigned to my first combat unit. We were sent to defend a colony world on the edge of Alliance space. The enemy was a species called the Kreth, insectoid creatures that consumed entire planets. Kyle listened intently. He had read about the Kreth Wars in his history studies, but hearing it from someone who had been there was different. The battle was brutal. Catherine continued. We were outnumbered 10-1. The Kreth kept coming in waves and we kept cutting them down, but they didn't care about losses. They just wanted to feed. Our commander was a Rothani named Vextar. He was old, experienced, and brave. But when the Kreth broke through our lines and reached the civilian shelters, he froze. Catherine's voice grew quieter. I saw children dying. I saw families torn apart. And Vextar just stood there calculating odds, weighing options, following protocol. That's when I smelled it for the first time. Purpose, but not in Vextar. In a young soldier standing beside him. A Centauran medic named Hal. What did he do? He ran. Catherine's whiskers trembled at the memory. He dropped his medical kit and ran straight into the Kreth horde. He had no weapons, no armor. Just his bare hands and a will that burned like a star. I watched him tear through those creatures, pulling children from the rubble, carrying them to safety. He was wounded dozens of times, but he didn't stop. He saved 43 lives that day before he fell. Kyle felt a chill run down his spine. Did he survive? Barely. But he was never the same. The purpose that burned in him that day consumed him. He became obsessed with fighting the Kreth, with saving everyone. He died 3 years later in another battle, throwing himself at an enemy he could never truly defeat. Catherine's eyes fixed on Kyle. That is the danger of purpose. It can save you or it can destroy you. Why are you telling me this? Because I smelled the same thing in you that I smelled in Hal. The same fire. The same absolute refusal to let others suffer. But you must learn to control it. Purpose without wisdom is just another way to die. Kyle thought about that for a long moment. You said something in the assembly. About the Alliance growing soft. About darkness coming. What did you mean? Catherine was quiet for so long that Kyle thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, the war beast spoke. There are things the Alliance does not tell its cadets. Threats that exist beyond the borders of known space. The older races remember, but they choose to forget. They built this alliance, this zone of peace and cooperation, and they convinced themselves that the universe beyond doesn't matter. But it does. It does. Catherine's voice was grim. The Kreth were not the only enemy we faced. They were not even the worst. There are things in the dark between stars that would make the Kreth look like harmless insects. Ancient races that predate the Alliance by millions of years. They sleep in the void, waiting. And they are beginning to wake. Kyle felt his blood run cold. How do you know this? Because the Vorn remember. We were created in the last war against the ancient darkness. Our makers bred us to fight enemies that could not be defeated by conventional means. We were weapons, yes, but also warnings. Our purpose was to sense the coming storm and prepare our partners for what must be done. Catherine moved closer, his massive head lowering until it was level with Kyle's face. That is why I knelt. Not because you are special among humans, though you are, but because your species is special among the younger races. You remember how to fight. You remember what it means to face extinction and choose to stand anyway. The Alliance will need that memory in the years to come. You think humanity can make a difference? I think humanity is the difference. Catherine's voice was absolute. The older races have lost their edge. They have lived in peace for so long that they have forgotten how to truly fight. They know tactics and strategy, yes, but they have forgotten the fury that comes from defending your home, your family, your very existence. Humans still know that fury. It is in your blood. Kyle stood and walked to the edge of the chamber. Through a narrow window, he could see the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, ancient enemies were waking, and somehow he was supposed to help stop them. "I'm just one person," he said quietly. "How can I possibly make a difference against something like that?" "You are not alone." Catherine rose and moved to stand beside him. "You have your kind, Nathan and Lily, and all the other humans who will come after them. You have the Alliance despite its flaws, and you have me. That is the purpose of bonding. Two beings become one weapon, one shield, one hope against the darkness." Kyle looked up at the war beast. "What do we do now?" "Now we train. We learn to fight together, to move as one, and we prepare for what is coming." Catherine's crystalline eyes reflected the starlight. "But first we must deal with those who doubt you. The other cadets will test you, Kyle Morrison. They will want to see if you are worthy of the honor I gave you. Some will try to hurt you. Others will try to break you. You must prove yourself not with words, but with actions." As if on cue, an alarm sounded through the chamber. Lieutenant Voss burst through the door, her face pale. "We have a situation. Some of the Rothani cadets are demanding a challenge. They claim Catherine made a mistake. They want Morrison to face their champion in the combat ring." Kyle felt his stomach tighten. "When?" "Now. They're waiting in Arena 3. Half the academy is already there." Catherine rumbled low and deep. "So it begins. Are you ready, Kyle Morrison?" Kyle thought about everything Catherine had told him, about purpose and fire and the coming darkness. He thought about his ancestors, warriors who had faced impossible odds with nothing but courage and determination. He felt that legacy in his blood, burning like a flame that could never be extinguished. "I'm ready." They walked through the corridors of the academy, Catherine beside Kyle like a moving wall of armor. Word had spread fast. Cadets from every species lined the halls watching them pass. Some whispered encouragement. Others glared with open hostility, but Kyle kept his eyes forward, his back straight, his fear locked away where it couldn't touch him. Arena 3 was a massive dome designed for combat training. When Kyle entered, he saw that Voss had been right. Hundreds of cadets filled the observation decks, their voices creating a roar of noise. In the center of the arena floor stood a Rothani cadet, bigger than any Kyle had seen before. His scales were dark red, almost black, and his golden eyes blazed with challenge. Commander Zekthar stood at the edge of the arena, his expression unreadable. Beside him, High Scholar Prin looked worried. But they didn't stop the challenge. This was tradition, Kyle realized. This was age. The arena floor was hard under Kyle's feet. He wore the standard training uniform, light armor over flexible fabric that allowed full movement. Drake Vortan wore the same, but on his massive frame it looked like the armor was struggling to contain him. Commander Zekthar's voice boomed across the arena. "This is a challenge fight under Academy rules. No lethal force. Combat continues until one fighter yields, is knocked unconscious, or is unable to continue. Medical teams are standing by. Do both fighters understand?" "Yes, sir," Kyle said. Drake simply nodded, his golden eyes never leaving Kyle's face. "Then begin." Drake moved first. For something so large, he was fast. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, his arm swinging in a wide arc aimed at Kyle's head. Kyle ducked under the blow and rolled to the side, feeling the wind from Drake's fist pass over him. The Rothani crowd roared approval for Drake's aggression. But Kyle noticed something. Drake was strong and fast, but he fought like someone who had never faced a real threat. His movements were textbook perfect, learned from instructors and simulations. There was no improvisation, no adaptation. Drake spun and came at him again, this time with a low kick meant to sweep Kyle's legs. Kyle jumped backward, creating distance. He needed to understand his opponent's patterns before committing to an attack. "Stand and fight, human," Drake snarled. "Or are you only good at running?" Kyle didn't respond. Words were wasted breath in a fight. He circled left, watching Drake's feet, his balance, the way his weight shifted before each move. This was something Kyle's instructors on Earth had drilled into him from childhood. "Watch, learn, adapt," Drake charged again, this time leading with his shoulder like a battering ram. Kyle waited until the last possible second, then stepped aside and grabbed Drake's arm as he passed. Using the Rothani's own momentum, Kyle pulled and twisted, sending Drake stumbling forward. It wasn't enough to knock him down, but it was enough to make the crowd gasp. A human had just moved a Rothani. Drake's face darkened with rage. He came at Kyle with a combination of strikes, high and low, left and right. Kyle blocked what he could and dodged the rest, absorbing the impacts on his armored forearms. Each hit sent shockwaves up his arms. Drake was incredibly strong. A direct hit would end the fight instantly. But Kyle was faster. He ducked under another wide swing and drove his fist into Drake's midsection. The armor absorbed most of the impact, but he felt Drake's breath rush out. Kyle followed with a strike to the inside of Drake's knee, then spun away before the Rothani could grab him. Drake was breathing harder now. "You fight like a coward. All defense, no offense." Kyle smiled slightly. "I fight like someone who wants to win." That was when Kyle saw it, the tell. Every time Drake prepared for a major strike, his left foot shifted slightly forward. It was tiny, almost invisible, but it was there. A habit beaten into him by countless hours of training. Drake came at him again, and Kyle saw the left foot shift. He knew what was coming. A straight punch aimed at his chest, powerful enough to crack ribs even through armor. Kyle moved before Drake's fist was even halfway through the strike. He stepped inside Drake's reach, too close for the punch to have any power. His elbow came up and caught Drake under the chin, snapping the Rothani's head back. Then Kyle's leg swept behind Drake's knee, and with all his strength he pushed. Drake fell. The sound of his body hitting the arena floor echoed through the dome. The crowd went silent. Kyle didn't give Drake time to recover. He followed the Rothani down, his knee driving into Drake's chest, his arm wrapping around Drake's throat in a chokehold. Not enough to damage, but enough to restrict blood flow to the brain. "Yield," Kyle said quietly, his voice calm despite his racing heart. Drake struggled, his superior strength evident as he tried to throw Kyle off. But Kyle's position was perfect, his leverage absolute. He had learned this hold from a Brazilian instructor on Earth, a woman half Drake's size who could make grown men tap out in seconds. "Yield," Kyle repeated. Drake's struggles weakened. His face was turning darker. Kyle maintained the pressure, counting seconds in his head. He could feel Drake's pulse through his arm, feel the moment when the Rothani's body began to go limp. "I yield," Drake gasped. Kyle released him immediately and rolled away, coming to his feet in a defensive stance. But Drake didn't attack. The Rothani lay on the arena floor, coughing and gasping for air, one hand raised in surrender. Commander Zekthar's voice cut through the silence. "Winner, Cadet Morrison!" The arena erupted in noise. Some aliens were cheering. Others were shouting in anger. The Rothani cadets looked stunned. Their champion had been defeated by a human half his size. Kyle offered his hand to Drake. For a moment, the Rothani just stared at it. Then slowly he reached up and took it. Kyle helped pull him to his feet. "You fight well," Drake said, his voice rough. "I underestimated you." "You're strong," Kyle replied. "Stronger than anyone I've ever fought. But strength isn't everything." Drake studied him for a long moment, then nodded. The Vorn chose wisely. "I will honor my word. I accept Catherine's judgment." They clasped forearms in the traditional warrior's grip, and the crowd's noise shifted from anger to respect. Kyle had not just won a fight. He had won something far more valuable. Acceptance. Catherine waited at the edge of the arena, his crystalline eyes glowing with approval. When Kyle reached him, the war beast lowered his massive head and rumbled softly. "Well fought, little warrior. You did not use your full strength. Why?" Kyle glanced back at Drake, who was being checked by medical staff. "Because I didn't need to, and because making an enemy today might cost us an ally tomorrow. Wisdom beyond your years." Catherine's tone was pleased. "You learn quickly." Lieutenant Voss approached, her expression a mixture of relief and amazement. "That was impressive, Cadet. Most humans would have tried to match a Rothani strength for strength. You used technique instead." "My grandfather taught me that," Kyle said. "He was a fighter back on Earth. He used to say that if you fight fair, you're doing it wrong." Voss laughed. "Smart man." Over the next few days, Kyle's life at the academy changed. He was no longer just the human who had been honored by a Vorn. He was now the human who had defeated a Rothani champion. Cadets who had ignored him before now nodded in greeting. Some even asked to train with him, but not everyone was pleased. Kyle was leaving the combat training hall one evening when he found his path blocked by 3 cadets. They were Krill, beings made of living crystal who communicated through electromagnetic pulses. His translator implant buzzed with their words. "Human, we wish to speak with you." Kyle stopped, assessing the situation. The corridor was empty. No witnesses. About what? About the disruption you have caused. The lead krill's crystalline body pulsed with red light. The Vorn should never have honored you. Your species is violent, unstable. You do not belong in the Alliance. That's not your decision to make, Kyle said carefully. No, but we can make your life here difficult. We can ensure you fail every simulation, every test. We have friends among the instructors. Friends who agree with us. Kyle felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting into another fight wouldn't help. What do you want? We want you to withdraw from the academy. Tell them you cannot handle the pressure. Leave quietly and we will not harm your fellow humans. Refuse and all three of you will suffer. Kyle's hands clenched into fists. And if I report this conversation? To whom? Commander Zekthar, who publicly supports you but privately doubts your species. High Scholar Prin, who worries about the political implications of a human-Vorn bond. No one will help you, human. You are alone here. That was when Kethrin's voice echoed through the corridor. He is not alone. The war beast emerged from a side passage, his massive form filling the corridor. His crystalline eyes blazed with fury, and his low rumble made the walls vibrate. The krill scattered immediately, their crystalline bodies clattering against each other as they fled. Within seconds, the corridor was empty except for Kyle and Kethrin. How much did you hear? Kyle asked. Enough. Kethrin moved closer, his whiskers twitching with agitation. I warned you that some would test you. But threatening your fellow humans crosses a line. We must report this. Will it help? They were right about one thing. We don't have many friends here. Kethrin was quiet for a moment. Then we make friends. Starting tomorrow, you will begin training with other cadets, not just humans. Form bonds with those who respect strength and honor. Show them that humanity can be trusted. Kyle nodded slowly. And the krill who threatened us? Leave them to me. The Vorn have ways of dealing with cowards who threaten those under our protection. That night, Kyle lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. Nathan and Lily had their own rooms, but he could hear them moving around in the human dormitory. They were probably dealing with similar pressure, similar threats. The weight of representing his entire species pressed down on him like a physical force. His communicator buzzed with an incoming message. He opened it and saw it was from Drake Fortan. Morrison, some of the Rothani cadets wish to train with you. They want to learn your fighting techniques. Tomorrow, Combat Hall 6, dawn cycle. If you're interested, Kyle typed back a simple reply. I'll be there. He closed his eyes and thought about what Kethrin had said. About 3 months passed. Kyle's days fell into a rhythm of training, studying, and building relationships with cadets from across the galaxy. The morning sessions with the Rothani became popular, drawing cadets from other species who wanted to learn the human fighting techniques. In return, Kyle learned from them. He learned the precision strikes of the Centaurans, the defensive stances of the Vrex, the flowing movements of the Pleiadians. But the most important lessons came from Kethrin. Every evening, Kyle spent hours in the bonding chamber with the war beast. They practiced moving together, thinking together. Kethrin taught him to sense electromagnetic fields, to smell emotions in the air, to read the subtle signs that predicted violence before it happened. The bond between Vorn and partner is sacred, Kethrin explained one evening. We do not simply fight together. We become one warrior with two bodies. Your eyes see what mine cannot. My strength covers your weakness. Together, we are greater than the sum of our parts. Kyle sat against Kethrin's warm flank, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of the war beast's breathing. When will I be ready? Ready for what? For whatever's coming. You said the ancient darkness is waking, that the Alliance will need humanity's fire. When will I be ready to face that? Kethrin's whiskers twitched in what Kyle had learned to recognize as amusement. You think you must be ready before the darkness comes? No, little warrior. No one is ever ready. You become ready by facing the darkness, not by preparing for it. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Kyle jumped to his feet, his heart racing. He had never heard this alarm before. Kethrin rose as well, his massive body tense. That is the combat alert. We are under attack. They rushed through the corridors toward the command center. Other cadets were running in the same direction, their faces showing confusion and fear. The Academy was supposed to be safe, protected by Alliance warships and defensive platforms. Nothing should be able to attack them here. Commander Zekthar stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the space around the station. His face was grim. When he saw Kyle and Catherine enter, he beckoned them forward. Unknown vessels have emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, the commander explained. They are not responding to hails. Their configuration does not match any known alliance or enemy species. On the main display, Kyle saw them. 3 ships, each one massive and angular, covered in what looked like black ice. They moved with a strange, jerking motion, as if space itself was resisting their presence. High Scholar Prin stood beside the commander, her violet eyes wide with something Kyle recognized as terror. It cannot be. They should not be here, not yet. We had more time. What are they? Kyle asked. Catherine answered, his voice heavy with ancient dread. The Voidbreakers. One of the ancient races. They are older than the Alliance, older than most of the species in known space. They should be sleeping still. The ships moved closer to the station. As they did, strange things began to happen. The lights flickered. The gravity fluctuated. Cadets cried out in pain as their translator implants screamed static. They are disrupting our technology, one of the officers reported. Shields are failing. Weapons systems are offline. We are defenseless. Commander Zekthar slammed his fist on the console. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. Get the cadets to the escape pods. Move now. But even as he gave the order, Kyle saw something on the display that made his blood run cold. The Voidbreaker ships were not targeting the station's main structure. They were targeting the dormitories, the areas where the cadets lived. They're going after the students, Kyle said. Why? Catherine's eyes blazed with fury. Because we are the future. They eliminate us now, and the Alliance has no new warriors to replace the old. It is a sound strategy. The first explosion rocked the station. Kyle was thrown against a console, pain shooting through his shoulder. Alarms blared even louder. On the display, he saw a section of the station tear open, exposing the dormitories to the void of space. How many cadets were in that section? High Scholar Prin's voice was barely a whisper. 300, an officer replied, including the human dormitory. Kyle felt his world stop. Nathan and Lily were in those dormitories. His friends, his fellow humans, the only family he had in this place. He turned and ran for the door. Morrison, stop! Commander Zekthar shouted. That section is lost. There's nothing you can do. But Kyle was already gone, Catherine at his side. They raced through corridors filled with smoke and sparking wires. Other cadets were evacuating in the opposite direction, heading for the escape pods. But Kyle ran toward the damage, toward the friends who needed him. This is madness, Catherine said, but he kept pace with Kyle. The section is exposed to vacuum. Anyone still there will be dead or dying. Then we save the dying ones. They reached the sealed blast doors that separated the damaged section from the rest of the station. The doors were locked, designed to prevent decompression from spreading. Kyle looked around frantically for a manual override. Stand back, Catherine commanded. The warbeast lowered his head and charged the doors. His armored skull struck the metal with a sound like thunder. The doors buckled. He charged again, and this time they tore open. The suction was immediate. Air rushed past them into the vacuum beyond. Kyle grabbed onto a support beam, his muscles straining against the pull. Catherine's claws dug into the deck plates, holding him in place. Through the opening, Kyle could see the dormitory section. The outer hull was torn away, exposing the rooms to space. But the internal corridors were still intact, sealed by emergency bulkheads. If anyone had made it to those corridors in time, they might still be alive. We need suits, Kyle shouted over the roar of escaping air. No time. Catherine moved forward into the damaged section. Get on my back. My armor can protect you for a short time. Kyle climbed onto the warbeast's massive back, pressing himself against Catherine's neck. He felt a strange tingling sensation as the warbeast's natural shields extended to cover him. It would not last long, but it might be enough. They moved through the shattered section, Catherine's 6 legs carrying them across debris and broken metal. Kyle scanned every corridor, every room, looking for survivors. His lungs burned. His vision was starting to blur. The shield was failing, then he heard it. A weak tapping sound, rhythmic and deliberate. Morse code taught to all human military personnel. SOS. There, Kyle pointed. Catherine turned and smashed through a jammed bulkhead door. Inside, they found them. Nathan, Lily, and 15 other cadets from various species, huddled in an emergency shelter. The shelter's systems were failing, its oxygen almost depleted. Kyle, Nathan's voice was weak. How did you— No time. We need to move now. Getting all of them onto Catherine's back was impossible, but the war beast solved that problem. He used his massive jaws to grab the shelter's support frame and began dragging it. Kyle helped push from behind, his muscles screaming with effort. They made it halfway back to the sealed section when the second explosion hit. Another part of the station tore away, and this time the blast wave caught them. Kyle felt himself flying through the air, tumbling in the vacuum. His last thought before darkness took him was that he had failed. He had not been strong enough. He woke in the medical bay. His body ached everywhere and breathing felt like knives in his chest. But he was alive. He turned his head and saw Nathan in the next bed, unconscious but stable. Beyond him, Lily and the other cadets. You saved them all. Commander Zekthar stood beside his bed. The Rothani's expression was softer than Kyle had ever seen it. Against orders, at great risk to yourself, you saved 17 cadets, including your fellow humans. Keithran— Kyle tried to sit up. Is fine, recovering in his chamber. The war beast says you are the bravest fool he has ever bonded with. The commander almost smiled. High praise from Avorn. The Voidbreakers? Gone, they withdrew after the attack. But they will be back. This was merely a test, a probe to measure our strength. The ancient darkness is indeed waking, and the Alliance is not prepared. Commander Zekthar sat down heavily. I doubted you, Cadet Morrison. I doubted your entire species. I thought the Vorn had made a mistake, but I see now what Catherine sensed in you. That fire, that absolute refusal to let others die even when all logic says you should save yourself. The older races have lost that. We have become too civilized, too concerned with protocol and procedure. He met Kyle's eyes. Humanity still knows how to fight for survival. You proved that today. And in the battles to come, the Alliance will need that more than any weapon or strategy. Over the following weeks, Kyle's actions became legendary throughout the Academy. But more importantly, they sparked a change. The Alliance military began to seriously study human combat tactics. They invited more human instructors to teach at the Academy, and they started to understand what Catherine had known from the beginning. Humanity was not a junior member of the Alliance. They were a weapon that had been waiting for the right moment to be drawn. The formal bonding ceremony was held 1 month after the attack. It was attended by representatives from every Alliance world, broadcast across 100 systems. Kyle stood in the ceremonial arena, Catherine beside him, and spoke the ancient oath of partnership.